And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 3. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Dad Life 365. I'm your host, Manuel Mathis, and I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode. We are going to be talking about idolatry. Now, I always start off this podcast with a verse. I think that's on purpose. Part of the reason is I'm a Christian and my final authority is the Word of God. I believe that God's Word is the final authority in a Christian's life, and so we should live our lives based off of that. Um, and I like the verse I used for today's topic because we're going to be talking about idolatry. Now, idolatry is something that we do constantly. Now, notice what the verse says, that you shall have no other gods before me. And that verse specifically is talking about the order in which we put our lives. Right now, we could say, yes, God is in our life, but is he a priority in our life? So, as we stand before God, take a mental image of you standing there and God is right before you. What is between you and God, right? What is distracting you between your relationship with God? And that's really what I believe, what this verse is really getting at is what distracts you from your relationship with God. That is an idol, right? So it doesn't have to be something materialistic, right? It could be things like, um, emotions, it could be other relationships, it could be a lot of different things. But I think in today's culture, in today's world, I feel like Tim Keller's book called Counterfeit Gods does a very excellent job pointing to the idols that we have as a culture, as a culture, specifically in the United States. But also, I think it could spread across other cultures into the world, because I think it's very biblically sound. But Tim Keller, rest in peace, his book called Counterfeit Gods points to one idol that I struggle with in my life. But I think that most American men, if not like a good majority of American men, really struggle with. And I'm going to read a portion of it, just from what I got from actually like researching it, looking it up. This is and just trying to find a synopsis of it. Right? I don't want to read the whole thing to you, obviously, but essentially, what this book is about is it is about how we find deep satisfaction and security that only God can provide for us. Right? So, an idol, what it does is we seek after those things because we're looking for something that only God can provide for us. That's essentially what an idol is. So, with that being an idol, we have to find ways to turn to God instead of to those things for our whatever the case may be, right? For our idol, right? And the four idols that he mentions in the book, which are important to mention, but I only want to talk about one of them, which is comfort, is he talks about power being an idol, approval from others being an idol, comfort, and control. Those are the four idols. And interestingly enough, most men struggle with the comfort one. You usually have two. Two of the four is usually where you line. And most men struggle with usually, uh, usually comfort is one of them, and then it could be one of the other three. And then for women, it's usually control, and then it could be one of the other three. Right, but those are the two top ones for each gender. It's control for females and comfort for males. And since I'm a male and I'm trying to speak to the control factor or the comfort factor of this, right? And depending on how this episode does, maybe I'll have my wife do an episode for me on the comfort of the idol of control, which that's, I mean, I don't mean to call it out like that, but I mean, the reality is that's what most women struggle with, and she even admits that. So, my struggle is obviously comfort. And what exactly is it? So, comfort is um, to live a life, right, with very little stress and demands and interruptions, right? You just want to live your life the way you want to live it, right? You don't want to be interrupted. You want to be distracted. You don't want too many demands on you, right? So too many interruptions. That's essentially what the comfort idol is, right? So, what people that struggle with comfort, what they tend to go to, um, is they tend to be lazy. They lack initiative, right? And they tend not to want to interact with others. Okay, so if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know some of the things I talk about, and one of those things is interacting with others, being a friend towards others. So that's because that's me trying to fight against my own idol, right? And I do that in the Christian context because that's also me trying to be a good Christian, right? If I'm going to worship the idol of comfort, then that means I'm going to lack the qualities of what it takes to be a good Christian. That's what it comes down to. So it's important that we do not neglect others, right? And that some of these behavior traits of like being lazy, like um, you have to get out of bed early in the morning, or you have to get to work, or you have things to do at work and you'd rather just not do them. Look, we've all been there. I get it. We all want to do it. And so, what I always try to do for myself is combat those. And so, I want to talk about a couple ways in which we can kind of fight against this idol, but I want to further explain it before we do that. So, one of its behavior traits, obviously, I mentioned the motivation behind it, but also what our greatest fear is. So, as it being a comfort idol, some of the things we don't like is hardship, right? Things being hard. We don't like that, right? Or like anxiety tends to be one of them. Now, not the type of anxiety where you're just like always nervous and worried about stuff, but when tough things happen, like we get really anxious. Um, and then personal demands, people demanding things of you, right? So it sounds crazy that someone like me has an idle comfort, comfort called an idle comfort. I said it right the first time, but it's crazy to think about someone that me. If you look at my life, you wouldn't think that, right? I have 5 kids, which they are very demanding, right? They require a lot of time, and we homeschool them. So that means I really don't get breaks from them in that sense, right? So another thing is like the fact that it causes hardships, like being married and having children and working through hard things. Like I am a terrible dad at times. I'm a terrible husband at times. And having to admit that and work through that is very hard. It's best just to ignore it and avoid it, right? But that's not an option. Okay, so that those are things that we like. I don't like, right? I don't like having to deal with those things sometimes. I'd much rather just let my kids do what they want, right? That's easier, right? Let them do what they want, and then if they gets too far and I don't like it, then get on them. No, I'd rather be obedient to the word of God, have children who are obedient, right? And so that requires hard work, hardship, and I don't like that, right? But then here's what's interesting, because he talks about in the book the lie that these idols promise. And when it comes to the control idol, it says that this idol promises that if you can just control your circumstances and avoid all discomfort, you will find peace and happiness. But like all idols, it is a false promise and never delivers the satisfaction it holds. All right, so what it essentially does is believing in this comfort idol, what it will do to you is it'll make you think that all you need to do is find comfort and that's where your peace and joy rests. And that's actually not it at all. So, um, I didn't realize I had this idol until I did some counseling. And then the counselor pointed this out to me. He was like, "Well, you have the comfort idol." I was like, "Excuse me? Explain this to me." And so he explained it to me, and then I got to read. I never actually read the entire book, but I did go into like reading articles about the book and stuff a while back, and I thought it was very interesting and very intriguing. So you don't necessarily have to read the whole book to get a grasp of it, but it's always good. It's probably best to go read it. Um, but remember, I'll remind you, the name of the book is called Counterfeit Gods. It's by Tim Keller. So if you're interested, definitely go read it. I'm not making any money off of saying you should go read it or not. But the point I'm trying to make here is I didn't realize I had this issue until much later on in life, till I already had 5 kids. Okay, but then I can looking back in my life, I can see how I have this idol, right? Because of certain tendencies I have. So then it became okay. So since this idol is very clear, since this idol stands between me and my relationship with God, right? Because God, it's like in His Word, He commands certain things of me, right? Like to discipline my children, to have a to love my wife with all my heart, soul, like to love Him with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. To love my wife as Christ loves the church, and to do certain things as a husband that demand things of me. But as a comfort idol, I don't like things being demanded upon me. Right. So yes, having 5 children is hard. Having one child is hard. Having 2 children is hard. The number of children doesn't matter, right? But some of the things I do to combat this is one thing that I try to do is work out. Now, yes, I am a typical CrossFitter, so I talk about CrossFit, just the way it goes. But that's the workout of my choice, right? Because I get very uncomfortable very fast in the workout. Right. So, example is I'll just use today's workout for an example. So today it was in 1 minute you had to do 10 burpees and you had to max out on your on the assault bike and calories until you can't go anymore. You have to do that for a minute, then you get a minute rest, and you do it again, then you get a minute. You have to do that 5 times. And by round 2 or 3, like you're just breathing hard, you're grasping for air, you're ready to be done, right? And I get very uncomfortable. So I'm sitting on this assault bike and I'm going and I'm looking at the clock and I have 10 more seconds left. Now I can think like, hey, I can kind of coast now for these last 10 seconds, or I could push as hard as I can and then I'll get my break. So I decided to keep pushing, right? But I am teaching myself to getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. Like that feeling of discomfort that I don't like, I want to go there and deal with it, right? Because one thing you realize is that it is actually in the work that you find hardship, but you also find joy, right? Because when I was done with it and I got to take a rest, I was like, man, I can do it, right? I find it more pleasing to keep pushing. Now, that's just one way that I try to deal with my idol is by working out. But ultimately, that's not what's going to satisfy me when it comes to this idol of comfort, right? So another thing that I try to do is I try to be very intentional about spending a lot of time with my kids. Right. So, one thing that's very easy to do is turn on the TV, walk away, let my kids have the TV for the day, and then I can go do what I want. Right. That's very comforting to me. And I can just sit on my phone, do my own thing, and not be bothered by them. So, one thing I try to intentionally do is spend time with my kids. Like, if they're like hanging out or like they're playing games or whatever they're doing because we really don't turn on the TV that well. We say we don't, but we try not to turn on the TV that much. That is one goal that we really do try to have, and that being a goal, that means that they spend a lot of time goofing off around the house. So we, as a couple, try to be around the kids as much as possible, even when they're goofing off. So they'll usually end up playing in our room for some reason, like we have a good enough sized room that all 5 of them could be in there, and like they'll be throwing a ball at each other or doing something. But I'm usually in there with them, hanging out, watching them do these crazy things, laughing at them, and that's where I try to spend the majority of my time. Now, um, the hard thing is when they're not doing things like that, and we're just like sitting around the house not doing much. They they demand a lot of your attention. Now I have a 6, 4, and 3 year old, so they already demand my attention more than my 11 and 9 year old. But they still demand so much attention and time when you're actually trying to do other things, like when I'm trying to make dinner. They're trying to be in there getting stuff in the kitchen, or even sometimes like, hey, can I help? It is much easier for me to do it, right? Instead of having them do it. It's very like annoying at times. Like, if I did this, we'd be done by now. But now, for the most part, unless it really does just take one person, like I let them do the majority of the cooking. Like obviously I'm standing there coaching them through it, but I let them do the majority of it. Like the other night, my daughter made chicken fettuccine alfredo. It's probably about a month ago, but she made most of the meal. The only thing I made was the noodles, and that was because like she wasn't tall enough to dump them in, and I was. So I poured them in, and that's all I did. And I stirred them, whatever. But she cooked the chicken, she made the sauce, and I coached her through how to do it, how to make everything. But she did the most of the work. Now it got a little annoying at times because she would ask a bunch of questions about it, and it's like, well, no, like just you just have to wait. You just have to wait. You just have to wait. You just and like it's just the redundancy of having to explain it over and over again. And it's like, oh, this would have been so much easier if I did it myself. But that's not the point, right? But it's things that I like to do to kind of get me um, to one, listen to Christ and to be a good father, and two, avoid this comfort idol. But ultimately, the ultimate thing that I try to do to remain out of my comfort zone and to really fight against this comfort idol is um, my reading my word and prayer, right? Because those two, I think prayer is probably the hardest Christian discipline. My old mentor used to talk about that all the time. When I lived in Vegas, I had a very good mentor who I miss a lot. Um, he would talk about how he said prayer is the hardest Christian discipline. Like spiritual disciplines, prayer is the hardest. And I think he's absolutely right. It really is. And spending time in prayer, especially when it's early in the morning, I have other things I could be doing. The last thing I want to do is sit here and read my word. The last thing I want to do is pray. When I could very well just scroll on Instagram or um, play my daily Wordle, or do the many other things that I could be doing, I choose to spend time reading my word and praying. And I feel like when I do those things, it's funny. When I spend time doing that throughout the rest of the day, the need to want to do those other things that bring quote unquote comfort don't happen as much. Like, I'm not so distracted by my phone at times. I'm not so distracted by other just other things. I'm more in the zone. I'm more willing to be a part of be a part of my kids' lives on a daily basis, right? And the fact that I want to engage with them. I want to talk to them. I want to laugh with them. Right? Now, as I say these things, it sounds strange. Maybe if you don't have kids, you're like, well, of course you want to do those things. But kids are exhausting. They really are. They do require a lot of your time. But the joy that they bring to your life is honestly immeasurable. Yeah, they're tiring, but I'd much rather, like have my five kids than not have them at all. I wouldn't trade them for the world. I love them to death. They make me laugh. We have a great time. Yes, there are times they make me upset. Yes, there are times where they need to be disciplined. Yes, there are times where they frustrate me. All those things are a reality, right? Like having kids isn't easy. No one ever said having kids would be easy. But the hardest things in life are the things that are most rewarding in life, right? And being a parent is probably the hardest thing I've done, but it's also one of the most rewarding things that I've done. Obviously, being a husband is more rewarding, right? Like watching my wife, who does not struggle with comfort at all. Like it was just amazes me watching her all the time when it comes to everything I struggle with, how she just gets through it. I was like, so it is achievable, right? There is a goal that I can attain, and even though I don't know if I'll ever get there on this side of heaven, I know that it's something that I can keep striving for because I've gotten better, right? That's the goal, right? With everything, you got to get better. Um, but I hope this episode is helpful to you. I definitely think you should check out that book by Tim Keller. Um, I mean, even if you don't check out the book, at least read articles about it. It is very, very eye-opening, and it would help you see some of the blind spots you have in your life, right? So the book is called Counterfeit Gods by Tim Keller. If you want to read it, but Google it, look it up. You could, you know, get a synopsis of it by just using like AI or something like that. They could give you a very good rundown of the book itself. But if it's something you're interested in, I definitely encourage it. But at the end of the day, whatever your idol is, you have to recognize it and you have to know that you're putting it before God. And that is not good, right? Because scripture tells us that we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And if we have idols, what we're essentially doing is distracting ourselves from God and not loving Him and loving that other thing, wanting it to give us the only thing God can give us. Okay? So if you want comfort in this life, If you truly want peace, you have to go to Christ, right? Because I have a T-shirt that says it, and I love it. It says, "Comfort is a slow death." And it really is. If you're always seeking comfort and you're always seeking your own vain pleasures and not self-interest of others or anything like that, like Christ calls us to, is to deny ourselves and to serve others. If you're not seeking that, you're slowly dying. That's what's happening. Comfort is a slow death. Avoid it, fight against it. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, everything else. And until next time, I'm out.